tennis. And I look around the room, and I look into the faces of the children that I see, and I always see them looking into they search my eyes, because kids always are trying to figure what we're thinking. And I just look at that panorama of total racial isolation, and I try to tell myself that this is what Dr. King died for.
Let me toss this into the conversation. Reading classes with no books. Chemistry labs with no chemicals.
That's right.
Computer classes where kids sit around and talk about what they would do if they had computers. Rats in the classroom.
Oh, yeah, and the children wrote a whole book about the rats in their classroom. That's in Los Angeles.
Don't clean the windows because they might fall into the classroom because it's so tentative.
It's New York.
Lunch scheduled at 9:42 in the morning.
That's right.
This is it. This says everything there is to say. 40 students, 30 chairs.
Let me describe that one. That's in Los Angeles. I walked into a high school in Los Angeles. It's called Fremont High. 5,000 children, 5,000 kids, in a building that's appropriate for maybe half that number. So many kids that half of them don't have classrooms. They have class in trailers. Trailers. I mean, real trailers. There's, for some reason in California, they don't call them trailers, they call them bungalows. But they don't look like bungalows. They're smelly trailers. I walked into a 10th grade class there, a history class, very good teacher, had 40 kids in the class. I said, how many classes do you teach each day? She said, I have 6 classes with 40 in each class, including homeroom. I said to her, how the hell do you teach 40 kids? She says to me, here, find out. She handed me her class. She teased me. She said, you know, you write the books. Let's see if you can still do it. Those kids were so eloquent. They were all black and Latino, not a white kid in the room. They were so eloquent. It was the last hour of the day. They asked if I would stay 2 hours. So we went for 2 hours. Just poured their hearts out to me about the squalor of the building. A beautiful, sensitive, very refined girl, poor Latino girl, but just naturally refined. Described to me what it was like to wait to use the bathroom, and then there was no time. She had to get back to class, and then she was afraid to raise her hand and ask permission because the teacher would say, you already had your chance. And she said, it makes you feel dirty. And she was such a clean, spirited girl. It upset me. Here's what I think, Dennis. I think aesthetics count. I think beautiful surroundings, which I see, because I keep going back to check in suburban schools, beautiful surroundings refine the souls of children. Squalid and ugly settings coarsen their mentalities. It's one of, to me, it's every bit as important as test scores in defining the distinctions between two totally separate social classes and castes, almost, in society. Because the way a child learns to think of herself, you know, the child who becomes coarse and toughened in reaction to all this filth is then tagged for the rest of her life.
Well, I was going to ask you...
as a sort of subordinate class of human being.
I was going to ask you, you're sitting around with a group of kids and you say to them, just a kind of a general question, what are you going to do when you finish school? And anger comes back and fear comes back, and finally, after some conversation, one of the kids kind of breaks down that wall that he's put up, and he said, I don't like to answer those kind of questions. You know, those kind of questions scare me.
That's right.
What happens to those kids? Because Cleveland, where there was 94% in one school, percent black and Hispanic, African American and Hispanic, 38% of the kids graduated. Okay?
That's right.
Now,
that's right.
What happens to all of those kids? What do we expect of them, and what happens to them?
Well, what good teachers that I know expect is always the best, because good teachers believe in these kids, but what happens to them is determined from the time they entered kindergarten, because it's not the fault of the high school teacher when she inherits kids who are reading. The average Black and Latino 12th grader in America today is reading at the level of the average white 7th grader. So what happens is the majority of these kids drop out, or they don't even wait to drop out as seniors. They disappear between 9th and 10th grades. Nowadays, because of President Bush's new testing law called No Child Left Behind, there's pressure not to promote kids if they fail their exams, but non-promotion is the best way to guarantee that kids will drop out even sooner, because you get a boy who's already 16 and he's in the 7th grade. What are the chances that he'll stay in school much longer because he feels humiliated? In fact, every time you hold a kid back, you don't promote a child, you double the chance that he'll probably drop out. So what's happening, Dennis, is we're getting this vast generation of kids, a larger number than at any time in the past 25 years, who are arriving at 12th grade, if they ever get that far, after having undergone what I call a kind of cognitive decapitation. They have had their intellect atrophied by that point, and even if a few of them are lucky enough to get into college, the vast majority do not complete college. The non-completion rate for Black kids in college is calamitous. Now, I know we don't have much time left, so I just want to come back to one point that gets forgotten a lot. I refuse to condemn the parents of poor Black kids or Latino kids and say it's their fault. That's a typical reaction of ignorant right-wing critics who've never looked at this issue with any genuine vision. What they say is it's the fault of those parents. Why aren't they reading to their kids and helping them with algebra and so forth? Here's why: because those parents went to the same rotten, separate and unequal schools 30 years before. And so it's no wonder they can't help their kids. If we wanted to compensate for that, we would have universal preschool to make up for that when these kids are babies. But no, we don't even have that. In fact, under George Bush, we are now giving Head Start, the model preschool program, to less than half the children in America, the lowest percentage in years. The ultimate issue here is not values of parents, whether rich white parents or poor Black parents. The ultimate issue is that we are still running in America a separate and unequal system. We have ripped the guts out of the Brown decision. We have ripped the guts out of the legacy of Dr. King, and we haven't even lived up to the tarnished promise of Plessy versus Ferguson, an 1896 decision that said at least if schools are separate, they'd be equal. They're separate, they're more separate than ever, and they're less equal than they've been in the 40 years since I became a teacher.
And you can't have quality education for kids if you even go in that direction, can you? I mean,
no, that's my deep belief. Thank you for saying that. You really read my books, and I'm always grateful for that, because many interviewers don't. The fact is, there are a lot of so-called experts now who hustle around the country telling people, I have a new magic formula for running a successful, happy, segregated, and unequal school. And every few years there's a new panacea. A few years ago it was phonics and only phonics.